Japanese people learning English have the compulsory education, middle school and high school at least.
It's kind of crazy to imagine like going through middle school in America. Just imagine you were also learning Japanese at the same time.
Well, then I think learning Japanese would have been a lot easier for a lot of other people learning Japanese.
America would truly become like a Nihongo Jozu'd feeder into Japan.
Nihongo Jozu'd, like that Dogen video.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the KoreKara podcast. This week we talked to Arthur, who runs the IU Connect YouTube channel, where after he reached fluency in the language, he decided to go transfer those skills to going and teaching English to Japanese people. We get into how exactly he reached that level of fluency, his thoughts on reaching native level, and some of his crazy stories from Japan.
You know what else is crazy?
What?
That you guys are not smashing the like button, so make sure to smash the like button. Hope you guys enjoy the podcast. And follow us on Twitter. Alright, so this podcast is brought to you by Riverside, which you guys might have seen. They also sponsored our interview with Peter Barkon. So if you're not familiar with Riverside, it is a podcasting recording service, which allows you to record and edit podcasts super easily. One of the biggest features that we enjoy is that since it records everyone's video and audio locally, there's no need to worry about and everyone's internet connection, which is something that we've struggled with in the past.
We were also able to utilize the cloud backup feature during the podcast itself, which let us go and back up real time as we were recording. We've had some instances in the past where we might lose some footage or some extraneous circumstances get in the way, so having this assurance was pretty amazing.
But yeah, so if you're looking to start a podcast or you already have a podcast, highly recommend you use Riverside, as it makes it really easy to edit and it saves a lot of time. Also, it's also being used by a lot of the top podcasts today.
And speaking of editing, if you do have an editor, Riverside has a Dropbox integration, which helped us out a lot because it just lets us seamlessly move our files from Riverside to Dropbox to then let our editor, shout out Mudon, go and just edit right away.
So make sure to check out the link in the description for 15% off Riverside services.
Now let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, so Arthur, can you give us a quick background of who you are and where you're at today?
So my name is Arthur Zetas. I've been living in Tokyo for the past 7 years or so, and I teach English on YouTube, which is what I'm most known for. But I started studying Japanese back when I was like 14 or 15, and that's like the one thing that kind of stuck my whole life, and I've made the most of it.
I guess we can like get right into your Japanese level and how you went about studying Japanese. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, 普通にペレペレっていうわけではないんですけど、すごいアメリカ人らしく話はするんですが、I speak pretty regularly in my everyday life, and how I did that was I actually didn't study. So my kind of the story of how I learned was my goal when I was 14 years old was to become a manga artist, and I wanted to study how to draw manga in Japan. So I started learning Japanese for that. So I had this clear goal, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. So for the first 4 years, I would study Japanese super hard on my own. For two of those 4 years, I did one-on-one lessons with an exchange student who lived nearby where I was. And I studied kanji, grammar, writing, speaking. I did everything that I was supposed to do. But then when I went to Osaka for a homestay, I couldn't speak at all. It was like totally different from everything that I felt real Japanese versus what I learned in lessons. So after that, I stopped learning Japanese, and I made a lot of Japanese friends with exchange students, and I tried to use Japanese in my everyday life. And that's what really helped me to speak the way that I do now.
So how long was that homestay in Osaka?
That homestay was 1 month.
Okay. So how did you get into that situation to begin with? You just like, all right, I got to get to Japan. Let's go.
Yeah. Well, I'm really blessed. I grew up in a really white neighborhood northeast of Boston, but in the town next to me, there was a college that had a ton of Japanese exchange students, right? Just by chance.
Right.
I got a tutor there, and my tutor saw that I was studying really, really hard. I was 15, and she was a college student teaching me once a week for 90 minutes, and she saw I was working so hard, so she said, "Hey Arthur, I'm graduating soon, and I won't be able to teach you anymore. So before that, why don't you come to my house in Osaka for a month, and you can live with my family and use what you've learned." And that's how I got there.
Oh man, I mean, that sounds like a pretty incredible experience, like going from manga artist and then studying Japanese with a tutor, and then all of a sudden you're in Japan. So was that like a big change, like a big shock for you?
Yeah, you know, the biggest shock for me was just how different real Japanese was from what what I had learned and practiced in my class. Like even, so of course in Osaka, they have Osaka Ben, right? But
Right.
they would speak to me in like Hyojungo. They'd speak just regular standard Japanese. But when they would talk with each other, they'd speak in Osaka Ben, and I couldn't understand anything at first. And the biggest shock for me was after I realized, holy crap, I'm in Japan now, was just how different the way of speaking was. So, but I got used to it after about a couple weeks, I would say.
That's really interesting that you say they spoke in Hyojin Go to you. It's almost like, you know how some Japanese people, they'll go and start speaking to you in English. It's kind of like the next level up above that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, all right, we'll speak to you in Hyojin Go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, it's funny though, because I'm convinced that the best way to learn is to interact and talk with people using real communication, like speaking not for practicing, but speaking for communication.
Yeah.
And I did that for a month, and I started speaking in Osaka Ben at the end. So then when I went to UW to Seattle for school, and I talked with Japanese exchange students there, they would laugh at me because I'm this white guy that speaks in Osaka Ben.
So you were able to carry that Osaka Ben all the way through, like afterwards. Like you learned that in
Yeah.
that 1 month. That's pretty
Well,
crazy.
Well, yeah. So what happened was my teacher was from Osaka, right? And her friends
Right.
were from Osaka too. So when she graduated, she introduced me to her friends. And so I kept on speaking like, oh, this is just normal Japanese. And it wasn't until I went to Seattle and I talked to people from Tokyo that I realized, oh, I sound pretty strange.
Right. So did you go back and learn Hyojungo and how to speak properly, like especially like business level Japanese?
I know. So speaking business level Japanese, talking about Keigo, we can talk about that. The way that I learned to speak more naturally in Hyojungo was I made friends from Tokyo, and I started talking Tokyo. Like, I can't do Osaka Ben anymore because it's not something I learned really. I just naturally got it. So now my intonation is more American or Hyojungo, but it was just because I made a lot of friends from Tokyo.
I see. So did you consciously, was that like also just like incidentally that you started speaking more Hyojungo, or did you consciously study like pitch accent and try to correct it back to
Yeah.
Hyojungo?
Yeah, so I think people started to like joke around and laugh at me when my intonation was wrong, and they would like mimic it, and they would say, oh, that's like Osaka Ben, but this is Hyojungo. They would teach me that, and that's kind of how I learned. I never really thought, I'm going to speak Hyojungo. It was more just through natural conversations, I realized, oh, this is kind of strange. Oh, they kind of laughed when I said this. And naturally, I just started to speak like the people around me.
Was it ever a goal of yours to like reach a native level, or like a level where it's like indistinguishable from your peers?
Yeah. So in the beginning, when I started learning, I was like, I'm going to be the Japanese master. So I originally studied to become a manga artist, but a couple years later, I lost my interest in manga and I just kept on learning it. That was my hobby. And my goal was to become like a native speaker. But then I realized that the amount of effort for me to get to like that almost native level was not worth it for me.
Right.
I could do it, and the benefit that I would get was I would get a little bit more confidence, and people would say, wow, you sound Japanese. But it wouldn't necessarily help my everyday life other than that, you know, especially because I'm an English teacher now, so people want me to speak in English. Have you guys ever talked about the 80-20 rule on this podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like for me to go over that last 20% was just like, I didn't want to put in that amount of effort for that.
Right.
Yeah, like it might take you another like decade even to really like get that final piece. Yeah, I guess like speaking of teaching English, like how did you end up doing this? Like what made you go down this path?
When I was in college, I was working for this now defunct language learning app that was little more than a phrase book when I started working with him. It came time for me to study abroad in Japan, and my boss said, hey Arthur, I want you to work full-time for me, $5,000 a month salary, let's do it. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to go to Japan and live my life to the fullest that I can while I'm doing my study abroad. And so I came to Japan with no job. I was a student, so I couldn't put in that many hours, and the English teaching job pay in Japan is really bad. So I thought I'm just going to ditch that, and I'm going to put my profile on a couple of English teaching sites for English teachers. And I started getting students, individually. So I would just meet up with people at a cafe and work and teach them English. And then I made a YouTube channel to help my students and to hopefully get more students, and everything just kind of took off after that.
Do you think it's the same process for like Japanese people learning English as maybe American people learning Japanese, or do you think there's like other difficulties that they might run into?
I think actually American people learning Japanese have it really rough, because Japanese people learning English have the compulsory education, middle school and high school at least, learning
Right.
English. So they know the basic grammar. They know how to make a sentence in their mind. When I was learning Japanese and I looked at Japanese syntax and I read in the book that it was backwards, I was saying, what? Backwards? How does that work? Because I've been used to subject, verb, object, never subject, object, verb. And it was just like, my mind was blown thinking that people think in this way. It was just so different.
It's kind of crazy to imagine like going through middle school and like elementary school in America. Just imagine you were also learning Japanese at the same time.
Yeah. Well, then I think learning Japanese would have been a lot easier for me and for a lot of other people learning Japanese too. Getting that grammar, I think the basics is the most difficult, I think.
Right. America would truly become like a Nihongo Jozu'd feeder into Japan.
Nihongo Jozu'd, like that Dogen video.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Nihongo Jozu'd, like, did that happen to you a lot, or is it something that you kind of just got out of entirely?
Dude, that happens all the time. All the time, because people, especially before the pandemic, when I would go out a lot and I'd go to stores or restaurants and stuff, especially in areas that are not frequented by by foreign customers so much, I always see like a process happening in the people's face. When I go to talk to them, their eyes widen up. They're like, holy crap, this foreigner is going to talk to me. I don't speak English. Holy crap, they start to panic a little bit. And then I start to say something and you can almost see them like wince a little bit, like, oh crap, here comes the English. Wait. Then it goes to confusion. Wait, what? I understand this. And then they like are like, wait, your face is not Jap, but you speak what? はい、そうですね。少々お待ちください。ってなります。
I'm glad you like walked us through the entire like slow motion like what's going on in Japanese people's minds. I feel like there's like the true insight that we needed here.
I'll tell you something else that's really embarrassing for me actually, because I speak fairly fluently. I'm not the best, and a lot of people say, man, Arthur, your pronunciation in Japanese is so nice. But a lot of times when I go to a store, I try to talk with someone in Japanese. They get that same kinchokan, that same anxiety or that stress, or they get nervous, right?
Right.
And what ends up happening is they get nervous and they look stressed. And then I see them and I get nervous and I get stressed. And then because of that stress and because I'm kind of like nervous, I can't speak Japanese very well. And so then we can't really communicate anymore. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy on their side. I'm like, if you just weren't nervous and talked to me like a Japanese person, I could understand. But that happens sometimes too.
Maybe sometimes you just gotta go wear like a paper bag or something. Maybe that doesn't really help. Maybe there's better options here. Maybe like Halloween, you'll wear a mask and it'll all be good. You know.
I mean, you can just wear like a face mask and a sunglasses.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, face mask with sunglasses.
Put put like a beanie on or something. There you go.
Yeah, put a beanie.
Yeah, you get the hoodie on.
Yeah, so they can't
and then
tell.
you like tighten it too.
Yeah. I'll tell you, man. I have so many of these stories. Is it okay if I share one more short story?
Just go for it. Just keep going, man.
Okay.
No, please share more.
Okay. Yeah, we want to know. We want to know.
Okay, so this was back. It was the night before my final exams in Tokyo. So this was maybe like a couple months before I was about to leave to go to the States, and we had our final exams, and I had to pass them to get credit. At that time I lived near Nakano Station, kind of close to the Seibu Shinjuku line. So I'm walking and I'm kind of close to the Seibu Shinjuku line area near my house. And there's this drunk guy, this really short, skinny guy, maybe his early 30s. And he just kind of comes up to me. He's like, すいませんが、駅はどちらでしょうか? Or something like that. He opens his eyes and he looks at me. He's like, oh, this is a foreigner. He doesn't understand. And so I say to him, I'm like, 駅はすぐそこにあるんで、もしよかったら案内しますよって言ったら、向こうが、he was like, お願いします. And then we start walking. He's like, 違う。 日本語上手じゃない？なんか普通に日本人と同じく喋れる。すごいな。なんか飲みに行きませんか? And he just invites me to go drinking with him. But for some reason, he doesn't live in that area either. I don't know why he was there. And so he's like, っていうかなんか一緒に飲める場所ありますか? And I'm like, I don't know. So he goes and he sees this guy outside on the street. There's no one else on the street on the sidewalk, and this guy's just smoking a cigarette. It's midnight, by the way. It's midnight at this time. And so there's this guy smoking a cigarette, and the guy goes over to him and asks something. You probably ask like, where can we go? And that guy brings us to this really small like dive bar area with seating for like 10 people. And we end up staying there till 4 a.m. And my final was at 8 a.m. But I passed. So that was good for me.
A happy ending.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. So if you have a basic conversation ability in Japanese and you live here, that'll be a part of your daily experience.
Interacting with the drunk people and then staying up all night.
Yeah.
Okay, for sure. When you said Nakano Station, I do remember a story that did happen there. This is the first time I'd ever been to Japan. It was a trip with some friends for like a week, right? I really need to go to the bathroom, right? So I walked into this mall that's right over there, right? 2 seconds after I go in the bathroom, I just hear footsteps. I hear a bunch of someone running like and I'm like, what's happening? And I just hear someone shouting in Japanese, and at the time I didn't understand any Japanese, so I didn't know what this guy was saying, but I could clearly tell he had a dire need to use the bathroom. And I was like, oh man, give me a second, bro. And I came out, and this guy just like swooped and ran in and like slammed the door. I've like never seen anything like it, and I was like, oh, Nakano is built different, and I have never been back since. Yeah,
well, I mean, after that experience, I don't know if I'd want to go back either, but there's some good parts to it, yeah.
No, I'm sure there's some good parts. I'm sure there's some good parts. Just not for me. I'm just kidding. But
just not in the bathroom.
Just not in the bath. Yeah, don't avoid the Nakano bathrooms. That's the place you don't want to be in the area. That's the main spot. But you mentioned you had your final, and then you ended up going back to the States. But how exactly did you end up coming back to Japan?
So like I said, after about 2 years of learning Japanese, I was less interested in manga, and I was just interested in learning Japanese. And then I got very interested in the culture. So when I went to UW, I applied to go study abroad 4 times. First 2 times I got declined. Third time I was able to go, but because of personal things I couldn't go. So my last year I was allowed to go. So I had in my mindset that, wow, this is my last shot. If I'm going to live in Japan, I got a scholarship so I can live and I don't have to work super hard. I can really try and set my foundation. So when I went to Japan for that year, I had in my mind that I was going to build the foundation for my life there somehow. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was just going to do something. So I worked to try to build my English teaching business while I was there. I realized I really like teaching English, especially the way that I'm kind of in a niche market a little bit. I came back from Japan to the States, and I worked on building my business, but I also had a girlfriend at the time that I met at school. And I was either going to work my business up to get an investor visa so that I could buy my way to go back to Japan and like start a business there and invest and be able to live there. But I got married before that, so I was able to go on a spousal visa. That was pretty nice.
Arthur out here using the life hacks, the circumstantial,
the shortcut to Japan.
I am super blessed, man. But yeah, I'm really happy because I met my future wife when I was studying abroad, and just worked out for me.
No, but you love to have it all work out.
Really
like you found you found your significant other, you got your business, and all of a sudden you're living in Japan. All as a consequence, you got the visa, and it's like, well, here you are. And I mean, now here you are down the line. Like, did you say it's everything you ever thought it would be?
This is gonna sound really bad, but the more I live here, the more I realize that Japan isn't like super special. It's just another country where you have to pay your taxes and you work just like everyone else. And I see a lot of people who come to Japan with like the anime eyes or whatever. They're like super excited to see the world and see what Japan is like. And after they live here about a couple years, they get really jaded and tired and they go back because the experience is what you make it. One of the reasons why it's so great for me here is because I speak Japanese. I can read contracts in Japanese. Like I'm even reading books in Japanese right now. But if I didn't have that Japanese ability, I think I would probably move back home, actually.
Moral of the story, learn Japanese. So I'm guessing that Arthur...
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So because you have learned Japanese, you still have the anime eyes in you, right? I actually kind of see them in the camera right now. It's a little hard to see, but I can see them.
Yeah. No, I would say if you speak Japanese and you're willing to adapt, like this is one of the best places to live. I mean, healthcare is affordable, everything's really convenient, the food is great, lifestyle can be healthy. Just the work culture is a little bit unhealthy. You know, people work too much. So if you live here, I'd recommend you start your own job or you get a more flexible job if you want to live here and speak Japanese. And
with that, Arthur, I think it's that time for the KoreKara message.
Yeah.
So I know this is a message you've been waiting for a long, long time, all the way back into Boston, into getting the tutor, into going to Osaka, coming back, going to UW, going and finally getting to study abroad, getting your business, getting married, and finally coming back to Japan. I know you've been bottling this up for a long time, so I'm gonna go put you on the spot, Arthur, and shine the lights bright onto you. Let's hear what your message is.
If you really want to experience Japan and you want to make Japanese life or Japanese culture a part of you, you really need to be able to speak Japanese. You need to study Japanese really hard, and that's a really tough thing. And there'll be really difficult times when you're learning. Maybe you want to quit. You're going to have to change the way you think completely in order to get it done. But if you get it done, a whole new world is going to open up to you. And if you really focus hard, you really try your best, you're going to get, this is going to sound like a little chokuyaku, you're going to get this amazing happiness that you can't really put into words. So, 皆さんぜひお勉強頑張ってください.
Inspiring words. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Arthur. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, man.
Hey guys, as we're making it to the end of the video, comment down below if you subscribed.
And I just want to quickly thank the patrons Darren, Suzu, Meredith, MK, Joey, Christopher, Kevin, Cedric, Faraz, Zax, Alan, Caucasian, Drew, Harris, Drew, Jack, Yui, and Sad Boy.
Let's go!